I knocked on the door in a puff, and as soon as the door opened a crack, I threw a big punch. Hey, your dog has been stealing my takeout for several days. How are you going to pay for it? The man with wet hair, who had just finished taking a shower and was still wearing a bath towel, was stunned for a moment when he opened the door and saw me. His eyes darkened before he spoke, and his voice was low. Add a contact information, and I will slowly compensate you. One bad news, one good news. The bad news is that my family's senior clothing factory went bankrupt. The good news is that I was hired by a blind HR manager, and it's still a big company, but I'm alone in the design department. Is it reasonable? God knows how much I couldn't believe when I received Tiani's interview notice that my resume was picked up like this. Even though I was full of doubts, I still went with my fart. There was no way. And that night my mother spread the news that I had been hired by Tiani all over my family's bankrupt elderly clothing factory. I tried to pull my mom's arm. Mom, I haven't even scratched the 8 characters yet. They just asked me to go for an interview, but I had to rely on my fate. Don't talk nonsense. But my mother is selectively deaf, and the cowite has been blown out. The old people in the factory gathered around me and asked me with a look of hope, Alexia Evelina, is it real? Are you going to work at a big company? I'm a designer of elderly clothing. Can a big company want me? But looking at their shining eyes, I held my breath and nodded. Yes, that is. Tiani has vision. Please me several times. Otherwise, I wouldn't be happy to go. Aunt Eleanor took my hand kindly. Alexia Evelina, what company are you talking about? What the day? Aunt Eleanor didn't hear me. I leaned close to her ear. It's called Tiani Group. What? I raised my voice. Tiani. Oh my God. Auntie Eleanor's ears don't work. I shouted at the top of my voice. Tiani. Aunt Eleanor. It's Tiani. Aunt Eleanor patted my hand. Good. It's so sweet. Sweet and good. It shows that it is not bitter. And the treatment must be good. Me, facing Tiani's HR manager, I pressed my slightly trembling hand and told myself, don't be nervous. It's just a little person. The HR manager was sitting on his lap in the air, flipping through my resume, and his expression was changing. In the middle of the night, the HR manager looked up at me with a complicated expression. You are a designer of elderly clothing. I nodded cautiously. Yes. Alexia Evelina has worked with this before. Yes, my family runs a clothing factory for the elderly. The HR manager pushed his glasses. How is the current development of your factory? I laughed dryly. I'm bankrupt right now. The HR manager pushed his glasses for a while, and the atmosphere became very delicate for a while, and I didn't talk to anyone. A phone call saved me, and the HR manager answered the phone respectfully, and it seemed that there was a lot of money over there. I don't know what was said on the other end of the phone, but after hanging up the phone, the HR manager judged the two of them, and he smiled kindly at me. Alexia Evelina, judging by your resume and the conversation you just had, you are a very good fashion designer. Our company is in great need of talent like you. Would you like to join our company? God, I didn't know I was so good. I excitedly stepped forward and grabbed the hands of the HR manager. Yes, very willing. It's my honor to join your company. But when I was taken by the HR manager to visit the company's design department, I was dumbfounded, and there was no one in the legendary design department. Such a big company. No one in the design department. Well, Manager Roman, what about the rest of our design staff? Manager Roman patted me on the shoulder. As you know, our company focuses on real estate, and now we want to develop in many aspects. So the company intends to test the water in the garment industry. You are the first and chief designer of our company's clothing. Do a good job, and have a great future. I was so surprised that I couldn't close my mouth. God, what kind of eye was he blind? Bah, what luck did I have to meet such a good thing? I couldn't believe it and asked Roman, so, Give me such a big office for my own use. Manager Roman nodded. Our company is committed to cultivating talent, so we will try our best to meet all your needs. Alexia Evelina can mention it if necessary. I hurriedly waved my hand. No, no. Manager Roman just calls me Alexia Evelina. Alexia Evelina, our boss, might be a better name. I didn't understand why Manager Roman was saying this, but the joy of pie in the sky overwhelmed my head, so much so that when I left, I was floating. Passing by the corner of the company's corridor, I didn't pay attention to hit a man's chest. This chest muscle, so hard. I can feel how good this person's figure is through the clothes. The man wrapped his arms around my waist, and I rubbed my sore nose and looked up into a pair of dark eyes, black hair, high nose bridge, Zhou Zheng's suit, 185 height. His gaze at me was unfathomable, and I was burned by his eyes, and tried to break free from his arms, but his hand around my waist did not move, and even tightened it. Walk attentively. The magnetic sound burst into my ears. I was stunned for a moment. I didn't expect his voice to be so good, but it was cold and cold, as if he was suppressing something. Just when I didn't know what to do, a cry, Martin Morton, broke the delicate atmosphere. I quickly broke free from his arms, and he glanced at his hand and turned to look at the man. What's the matter? When he spoke again, there was a coldness in his tone. The man seemed accustomed to a man's attitude. Martin Morton, Jaden of Shenghua is waiting for you in the office. The man frowned, and his voice was faint. Isn't there a right Stowe? Right Stowe says that Jaden of Shenghua is as rigid as you are, and he can't handle it. Standing stupidly on the side, I suddenly realized, this man is Tianius Cold-Face Buddha Martin Morton. What kind of luck did I have when I stepped on a horse? I bumped into Tianius' biggest boss before I officially joined the company, and it was still the most difficult Martin Morton in the legend. I've been nervous when I saw the leader since I was a child, so I took advantage of their speech to sneak away, and he didn't know who I was anyway. However, I ignored Martin Morton's deepening gaze. I got a job and became my family's only hope for a senior clothing field. Under the watchful eyes of the old people in the factory, I left our town with a bulky suitcase, found a slightly dilapidated neighborhood in the big city, and rented a house. But can you believe it? Maybe it's because people are so beautiful that dogs can't get used to you. Recently, I encountered something particularly strange. My takeaways are always lost for no apparent reason. As a result, I adjusted the surveillance, and the real culprit who stole my takeaway for so many days turned out to be a dog, a very big dog. At the time, I was still wondering, why am I so unlucky, and the takeaway thief is focusing on me. My family's garment factory went bankrupt, and the whole family depended on me to survive, and I struggled to survive. I'm already poor enough to do this, and God won't let me go. I thought that I would definitely not be able to defeat the thief if I was such a thin person, so I just forbear. As a result, I endured my anger for so many days, and I was bullied by a dog for a long time. I can't afford to mess with people. Do I have to swallow a dog? By the time I rolled up my sleeves and knocked on my upstairs door, I was ready to fight with the dogs. I stuck my waist and was menacing. Hey, your dog has been stealing my takeout for days. How are you going to pay for it? But as soon as the door opened, I saw the person coming and immediately silenced me. A tall nose bridge, a clear yaw-line, tight muscles. These are not the point. The point is, this man who looks very ascetic with a bath towel is Martin Morton, my new big boss in the company. I silently put down my waist, inserting hand. What a coincidence! He actually lives in a broken community with me, experiencing life. He pushed open the door and saw that I was uncomfortable for a moment, and when I tried to see clearly, I only had time to meet his dark eyes, and I couldn't see any emotion. Martin Morton looked at me expressionlessly, and his eyes seemed to darken suddenly. add a contact information, and I will slowly compensate you. I secretly glanced up at him. A face was terrifyingly cold. I swallowed my saliva carefully, and said with a wry smile, "No need, Martin Morton." I volunteered to give it takeout. I don't know if it suits the dog's appetite. How dare I say it's a dog's business? I've only been here for a few days, but I've heard a lot about Martin Morton. Anyway, he is indifferent and domineering, unapproachable, and meticulous in his work. If something goes wrong, you'll have to walk away. The temper is still very bad, and if you can say it clearly, you will never spend extra words with you. In short, to provoke him is to die. I snorted and immediately wanted to turn around and leave, but Martin Morton reached out and grabbed my arm, and the drops of water on my hand dripped onto my hand, and my heart was numb. He said coldly, "If I don't raise my godfather, I will be responsible for my dog's affairs." I didn't expect Martin Morton to be such a serious person, so he had to add my weshit to compensate me. He took out his mobile phone to scan my code. I don't know if it was my illusion. Martin Morton's hand holding the phone was trembling slightly. I agreed in front of him. "Martin Morton, then I'll go first. Don't take the dog's business seriously. I'm voluntary," I said as I walked down. Who knew that Martin Morton was about to close the door with a soft to see me off? But he's still wearing a bath towel. I didn't expect Martin Morton to be so old and manage his body so well, but the old man is really fragrant. Water droplets from his hair dripped onto his chest, sliding all the way down, wetting the bath towel around his waist. I looked down, swallowed, and waved my hand. "No, don't send me. Martin Morton is too polite." "Ha, it's on the first floor. It's very close. I'll go down the stairs to get there." Martin Morton's eyes darkened as he closed the door. "Okay, what's going on?" I actually heard the sense of grievance. When I got home, as soon as I opened the door, I had a message alert on my phone. I'll click on it and take a look. Martin Morton's transfer. 1, 10, 100, 1,000, 100,000, lakh. How many takeaways? This. Is it acceptable? Just when I hesitated, another message came. "Sorry, my dog is not sensible. I hope it doesn't bother you." Mom, that's so polite. I hurriedly went back to the past. "It's okay. It's okay, Martin Morton. Don't worry. Don't be so polite. I can't accept the transfer. It's really okay. You're too polite. Over there almost seconds back. Take it. It's not polite. It's due." What a domineering man. So I took it. While receiving the money, I sighed. No wonder Martin Morton can open such a big company. It's really good. I don't know what the outside world is blind about, and they actually say that Martin Morton is cold-blooded. I think it's jealousy. So I'm talking about Martin Morton. The phone rang again, and it was still a message from Martin Morton. Didn't Martin Morton say that he was aloof? False. Rumors are all false. This time it's a voice. I clicked on it. Too nice voice. The dog I have educated it. It was not like this before. Maybe it just wants to be close to you. You don't be mad at it. Angry. 100,000. I don't want to be angry with it. It's simply the most sensible dog I've ever seen. I also hurriedly sent a voice message. Not angry, Martin Morton. I like it very much. I want to be close to it. I am not angry at all. As soon as it was sent, Martin Morton replied, "Okay." Obviously, it was just one word, and I could hear the joy in his tone, and he seemed to be in a good mood. The neighborhood where I live is very good, but it is too remote and too difficult to take a car. In order not to be late for work, I often get up at 6 o'clock. It's just that today, in the dark, I saw the luxury car parked outside the community at a glance, and I couldn't be too conspicuous. There was a tall man standing outside the car, his back to the car casually. His hair was a little wet in front of him, as if he had been standing outside for a long time. He played with a silver-white metal lighter in his hand, and bit a cigarette loosely in his mouth. I approached and called out to him in surprise, "Martin Morton, you are up so early." Martin Morton's hand shaking the ash of the cigarette paused. A look of annoyance flashed across his face, and he hurriedly extinguished the cigarette. "Excuse me, smoked a cigarette. God, is it so polite? If you smoke a cigarette, you have to apologize to me." It's okay. I just didn't expect you to get up so early, and I thought I'd come to say hello to you." "You smoke slowly, out of the way." As I spoke, I deliberately stood a few steps to the side to leave plenty of room for him. "Who knows?" Martin Morton was stunned when he saw my movements. With a dark look in his eyes, he whispered to me, "If I don't smoke next time, there shouldn't be a smell of smoke, right?" I didn't react for a moment, and subconsciously said, "It should be right." He seemed relieved. "That's good." I stood by waiting for the bus, and for some reason, Martin Morton didn't even leave. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Since I was a child, I have been afraid of leadership, not to mention the myth of Martin Morton in the business circle. I am uncomfortable. Just as I was wondering why he didn't leave, he suddenly asked me with a faint expression, "Do you want to ride in my car?" I was stunned for a moment, then I couldn't believe it, and then I said, "Is it really possible? Won't it be too much trouble for you?" He looked away uncomfortably. "Don't bother, drop by." As he spoke, he took the initiative to open the car door for me. Co-pilot, how can he I can sit in the co-pilot of the president of Tianyi. I am out of breath. The car was quiet, and when waiting for the red street lights, Martin Morton put his hand on the steering wheel casually, and the corners of his lips were slightly hooked, showing his happy mood at this time. I stole a look at him. His jaw line was cold and hard, but his eyes were unusually gentle. It doesn't match the rumored title of his cold-faced Buddha at all. How could Martin Morton live in that neighborhood? I thought you were living in the kind of high-end neighborhood where even mosquitoes pass by and you have to go through a security check. Martin Morton was stunned for a moment, and opened his mouth several times without giving a reason. The atmosphere seemed to become a little awkward, and I wanted to liven up the atmosphere and make a joke. But who knows? Martin Morton is really thinking about it. Martin Morton's brow furrowed slightly, and he seemed to be still thinking of a reason. I hurriedly said, "I see. You must be here to experience life." Martin Morton uncomfortably avoided my gaze and nodded lightly. "Well, you're right. I just wanted to try." As if it were spoken to me, and as if it were spoken to himself. With that, he sat down and stared ahead, his hands on the steering wheel. It's just that the tips of his ears are getting redder. I glanced at him, and didn't dare to ask him why his ears were red. What to do? I actually think that this man, who is 8 years older than me, and is rumored to be stereotypical and indifferent, is a little cute. As I got out of the parking lot downstairs, I got into the elevator with Martin Morton, and happened to run into Wright Stowe, another boss of the company, who was already in the elevator. The legendary smiling tiger is the opposite of Martin Morton, but he has a head in his head, and he wears a suit with a ruffian. He looked up at us, put away his cigarette, and looked at me with interest. "You're the new Alexia Evelina. Wright Stowe even knows about me." "Yes, it's only been a few days since I came to the company." Wright Stowe's teasing eyes jumped back and forth between me and Martin Morton several times. In a teasing tone, he said to me, "Then Alexia Evelina has to do a good job. You are the only fashion designer in our Tianyi, or Martin Morton has worked hard to carry out this project. Whether our real estate company can gain a firm foothold in the clothing industry depends on you." Wright Stowe was about to say something, but was coldly interrupted by Martin Morton. "Has the case over there been settled?" Hearing this, Wright Stowe snorted. "That Jaden, like you, is a big lover, and he doesn't want to leave a good forest to hang himself on a tree. I think you and he will have more of a common language." I stood next to them, with an expression that knew the big gossip. "Is this something I can listen to?" Martin Morton turned out to be a big lover. Didn't you say that he wasn't close to women? Over the years, the rumors have become more and more unreliable. When the elevator stopped on the 12th floor, Wright Stowe stepped out of the elevator. As he was about to get out of the elevator, Wright Stowe suddenly turned around and said to Martin Morton with a wicked smile, "I heard that the design department is on the same floor as your office." "That's right. I thought I had to teach you a few tricks." Who knew that Martin Morton's face was gloomy and terrifying? "You talked a little too much today. Is it that there are too few cases at hand?" Wright Stowe looked proud. "Not really. It's just that I've been a little idle lately, watching others fall in love and fall in love with myself. That feeling is really different. Not to mention, I really want to drink happy wine." After saying that, he turned to look at me again. "Alexia Evelina, I'll meet later. The whole company is coming. Play hard. Don't embarrass us, Martin Morton." After Wright Stowe left, the elevator was eerily quiet. Martin Morton lowered his eyes and looked at me, his eyes deep. "There will be a meeting later. Don't be nervous. I will support you." My heart trembled and I looked up stunned, confirming the seriousness in Martin Morton's eyes. He smiled and said, "Martin Morton, I'll fight for you. I've already done the blueprints and plans." I stared straight at him, and Martin Morton abruptly looked away and complimented me in a serious tone. "Awesome." Martin Morton avoided my gaze and did not look at me, a subtle smile on the corner of his mouth. The corners of my mouth also went up, and I reaffirmed that Martin Morton was not scary at all. When I used to be in a senior clothing factory, I didn't have any experience in meetings, so we all sat together and talked about the work together. Therefore, today's meeting, hundreds of people from Tierney Group are here, and the senior leaders are all there, which is enough to prove that it is a big scene, and it is also a great challenge for me. But if you want to wear a crown, you must bear its weight. I decided to eat this bowl of rice, so that I would not disappoint those who believed in me. Clothing for the elderly is a big enough pie to eat or not, only a large platform is needed, and Tierney happened to be my chance. The meeting began with a large number of people sitting in the hall, with Martin Morton and Wright Stowe sitting in the middle of the main stage. I almost didn't dare to recognize him. Indifferent and noble, which was the only word I felt suitable to describe him. Martin Morton had a cold face. He didn't do anything. He had the air of a superior, and he was full of oppression, which made people dare not disobey. I think that's what he does at work, as if it's the same as the rumors, or maybe that's the real him. I was introduced to everyone by the then manager Roman. Immediately, a senior leader said disdainfully, "Designers of elderly clothing. What market can there be for elderly clothing? And do the elderly understand aesthetics? Why not make clothes for young people? We should keep up with the trends of young people." In the face of his questioning, I just smiled lightly, raised my hand, and released a video. That's a video of a dozen very elegant grandmothers, dressed in cheongsams, walking together. Is a very ordinary road, but they use it as a stage. After the video was played, I began to explain to everyone. Manager James watched this video, and still thinks that the elderly don't understand aesthetics. In our current society, too many people have such ideas, so they ignore the market for elderly clothing. All of us will grow old slowly, but time has given us experience and temperament in addition to wrinkles. That's a charm that young people don't have. They have seen a level of prosperity that we have not seen. When you are old, you can't have the right to be beautiful. If one day I get old, I will want to wear my favorite clothes every day and be beautiful every day. Therefore, the market for elderly clothing is much larger than everyone thinks, and I have the confidence to do it well. When I finished, there was silence in the hall, and then Martin Morton took the lead in applauding. In the midst of the applause, I crossed the crowd's gaze and made eye contact with Martin Morton. His eyes were deep, as if he had suppressed his emotions for a long time. The corners of the mouth seemed to be trying to control the upward arc. Someone else wanted to refute my point of view, but Martin Morton glanced at Manager James, who spoke first, and said lightly, "Manager James should broaden his horizons. Next time, I don't want to hear such stupid words. If you are not capable, give up your seat and let someone who is able to sit it." Manager James' face turned pale, and he immediately replied, "Martin Morton is right. I don't think as much as Alexia Evelina. Alexia Evelina is really a professional fashion designer. I believe she will be able to do this job well." Martin Morton listened, nodded in satisfaction, and the corners of his lips hung with a light smile. "Let's break up if there's nothing to do." The person next to me looked surprised, and whispered to the people around her, "God, you see, I'm not mistaken. Martin Morton, is there something happy today? He is too gentle today. Did he just laugh?" Another person replied, "I saw it." I laughed. "Did you say Martin Morton was in love?" "Yes. I feel like he's like a spring breeze." Which fairy is so capable that she took Martin Morton? Thank you so much for the first time. This meeting was so short, and Martin Morton hasn't cursed yet. I couldn't help but be stunned after hearing this. Feelings. Martin Morton is so terrible. Did I meet a fake Martin Morton? After the meeting, I was in the company. Everyone knows about me, and as the only department in the company, there must be a lot of people staring at me. Then I can't relax. I have to hurry up and finalize the design draft. So, on the same day, I changed the design to the point where I lost track of time. By the time I reacted, it was already dark, and all the people in the company should have gone. I walked to the elevator with my bag, and was annoyed how I was going to get back. So could I take a taxi now? Who knows? When I passed by the president's office, the lights inside were still on. Martin Morton hasn't left yet. I cautiously pushed open the door and found Martin Morton sitting in his seat, holding a picture frame in a daze. I tapped my finger on the door, and Martin Morton saw that it was me, and put the frame in the drawer in a bit of a panic. He wears gold-rimmed glasses, giving people the feeling of being a scum. Indescribably handsome. I smiled and asked him, "Martin Morton, you haven't left yet?" Martin Morton's gaze moved, and he said softly, "It's been a bit busy today." Hearing this, I subconsciously looked at his clean table. He coughed uncomfortably and explained, "Just put it away, and I'm going to go back." There was a pause, and he hesitated, as if hesitating how to speak. I cheekily said, "Martin Morton, can I join you?" "It's too late. I'm afraid I won't be able to get a taxi." As I spoke, I folded my hands and looked at him pitifully. "Martin Morton, please." Martin Morton was stunned for a moment, then nodded and said, "Okay." I cheered, "Martin Morton, you're so nice." Martin Morton avoided me and curled the corners of his mouth in restraint. It's just that when we just got on the elevator, suddenly the elevator was pitch black and couldn't stop. The elevator had a power outage and Martin Morton and I were trapped inside. What to do? I have claustrophobia. My breathing began to rapid, and in the moment when I was particularly helpless, I was pressed into a warm embrace. Martin Morton clasped the back of my head with his big hand, and ran it through my hair again and again, like a child, and said in a gentle tone, "Alexia Evelina, don't be afraid, don't be afraid." But if you listen closely, you can hear that the tone of his voice is also trembling. Is he nervous too? But he had never seen any scenes. How could such a powerful person be nervous? Martin Morton patiently coaxed me while methodically pressing the inside of the car to operate. The alarm button on the disc asks for help. I don't know how long I was imprisoned, but Martin Morton kept holding me, and my heart was a little less scared because of him. When the elevator doors opened, Martin Morton gently put his hand over my eyes. I called out to him in confusion, "Martin Morton." He spoke in a hoarse voice, "Wait a minute, the light is a little harsh." I was stunned. My heart was beating so fast for some reason. I could even hear my pounding heartbeat. All the senses are also infinitely magnified, and the touch of Martin Morton's hand on my eyes is unusually clear. as if there is a feather gently passing through my heart. This feeling is amazing. I unconsciously tugged at his clothes, and my palms began to sweat. Martin Morton's voice rang out with a cold voice, as if he was speaking to the person next to him. Why is the elevator rescue so slow? Whoever is in charge of this, tell him to come to my office tomorrow, and I will hear a reasonable explanation. When I got used to it, he put his hand down. I was caught off guard when I met him, and I couldn't help but be surprised. Martin Morton's eyes were a little red, and his face was not as calm as I expected, and he looked worse than me. So, he's been comforting me in the dark in such a state just now. Martin Morton asked me softly, are you still afraid? I shook my head, whispered, thank you, and looked away. I was burned by the temperature in his eyes. Why is it like this? I take Martin Morton's car to work every day. Strange to say, I always meet him every time I go to work. From being embarrassed at the beginning, to being cheeky and taking the initiative to get into the car later, I've gotten to know Martin Morton, and I'm not so inhibited in front of him. Martin Morton was really attentive, probably because of my age. He took care of me so much. I feel that he has an endless heart, worrying about whether I have breakfast every day, whether I sleep enough, and whether I wear warm clothes. If he is a boyfriend, he must be a complete father's boyfriend. Wait, how did I come up with the word daddy boyfriend? Sin it, I should respect Martin Morton as an elder. Listening to Right Stowe. Today is Martin Morton's birthday, and I look at the pen I bought with a lot of money in my bag and feel very satisfied. I'm such a considerate subordinate to my superiors. I noticed a long time ago that the pen Martin Morton had been using was very old and was even starting to leak ink, but Martin Morton was still using it. So, for Martin Morton's birthday, I chose a very expensive fountain pen, and wanted to give it to him. I knocked on the door. Martin Morton. Martin Morton tugged at the corners of his mouth. Come in. I grinned and handed him the pen in my hand. Then he replaced the fountain pen in his hand. Martin Morton, I heard that today is your birthday. I bought you a fountain pen. Your old fountain pen is so broken. It should have been replaced a long time ago. You are too economical. Do you want me to dispose of it for you? Martin Morton didn't speak, but his gaze began to grow cold. I sensed something was wrong and asked him carefully, Martin Morton, what's wrong with you? Martin Morton looked at me, with a dark look in his eyes, as if he was trying to suppress some emotion. This pen is old to you, but it's important to me, and I don't need a new one. The tone was cold like I've never seen before. I hurriedly explained, I'm sorry, Martin Morton. I didn't know it was so important to you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean anything else. I just thought, you take care of me like an elder on weekdays. It's your birthday, and I want to give my too. Before I could finish speaking, I was interrupted by Martin Morton. He snorted coldly and looked at me mockingly. Who wants to be your elder? That's right, this pen might be a treasure for me. Martin Morton has always been very patient with me, and this is the first time I've heard him say foul language. I was stunned for a moment, and suddenly felt aggrieved for no reason, and took the new fountain pen I gave me angrily. So what are you doing? Sorry, Martin Morton. It's because I don't see my position clearly, and this pen I gave me is not worthy of you, so I'll dispose of it. With that, he turned around and left. Martin Morton's expression flashed with a little annoyance, and he wanted to raise his hand to grab me, but finally put it down silently, and watched me leave. I threw my pen in the trash can outside the office and, without waiting for Martin Morton, took the car home. Not long after I got home, I regretted it. Why did I throw away such an expensive fountain pen? So, I took a taxi back to the office. When I arrived at the company, it was almost dark, and the company was almost finished, just right for me to rummage through the trash. But when I got to the garbage can, a familiar figure was crouching next to the garbage can, turning over vigorously. In the dim light, I saw a handsome face. Martin Morton. The dignified Martin Morton is actually rummaging through the trash can. At that moment, the visual impact hit me. I didn't dare to make a sound. Next to the trash can, Martin Morton was struggling to find something, and suddenly, a smile finally appeared on his expressionless face. The thing he was holding in his hand glowed with the cold glow of metal, in the dim light. That's the pen I didn't give out today. Martin Morton rubbed his pen with his own clothes, his movements careful and precious. I was surprised when someone tapped me on the back. I turned around and it was Wright Stowe, who was filming me. He motioned for me not to speak, and I saw him typing on his phone. Would you like to talk about that idiot in Martin Morton somewhere else? I nodded softly. On the company's rooftop, Wright Stowe slouched against the railing and pulled a lighter out of his pocket. Smoke a cigarette. Don't mind. I shook my head. Don't mind. You smoke it. Wright Stowe lit the cigarette and took a puff in his mouth. Martin Morton, if Lao Tzu doesn't help him, it is estimated that there will be no progress in his life, and he has to rely on Lao Tzu to get out. Not knowing what Wright Stowe was talking about, I looked confused. Wright Stowe spat out the smoke ring and continued. Did Martin Morton lose his temper with you today? Because of that broken fountain pen? Yes, that pen seems to be important to Martin Morton. Wright Stowe scoffed. It's just a broken pen like that fool of him. Who gave him that? That's why it's important. Wright Stowe glanced at me. Why? I really don't remember what I sent out. I don't understand. What do you mean? I sent it. Wright Stowe glanced at my reaction and said, Lao Tzu told him at the time. How could it be that Grandpa gave her such a new fountain pen to use for many years? He doesn't believe it, and he believes that you didn't lie to him. Wright Stowe's words made me reconnect memories that I hadn't cared much about. Unsure, he asked. Martin Morton was the one who drove me to the college entrance examination. Wright Stowe lit a second cigarette. Remembered. I nodded. Remembered. During the college entrance examination, I was too late to rush to the examination room because of my courage on the road, so I stopped a car casually. Because I was in too much of a hurry, I didn't pay too much attention to it. I just remembered that it was a very handsome brother. I was coquettish with him at the time, and he agreed to give it to me. Before getting out of the car, I gave him a fountain pen, and told him that it was a pen that my grandfather gave me, and that I had used it for many years. But as a token of gratitude, I gave it to him, hoping that he would not dislike it. But I actually lied. It wasn't my grandfather who gave me fountain pens. I bought them in the store to prepare for the exam. Because it was cheap, I bought several of them. So, did Martin Morton use that cheap fountain pen for so many years? Wright Stowe threw the cigarette on the ground, and extinguished it with his foot. That day, when you were riding in his car, you accidentally dropped a passport photo, which was framed by Martin Morton's pervert, and placed on the table for several years. It dawned on me that no wonder, that I was missing one ID photo at that time, and everything was explained. Wright Stowe put his hands in his pockets, and said in a tone of rare seriousness, I told you so much, and I didn't mean that you had to do anything. I just hope you can think about it, and if you like it, then don't hesitate. If you don't like it, then refuse decisively, and don't hang him. That guy is the one you gave him a little hope, and he can wait for you for a long time. After saying that, he walked away with his hands in his pockets, walked a few steps and turned back. Alexia Evelina, you may not know, he did a lot of things behind his back to get close to you. Otherwise, what do you think is the reason why your elderly garment factory occupies such a good piece of land, and is eyed by so many people, and now it is bankrupt, but it can still be opened? If it weren't for Martin Morton, the garment factory would have been obsolete a long time ago. He's actually met you many times, but you've never given him the rest of your eye. On the rooftop, Wright Stowe struck me for a long time with what he said. It was a story about me that I never knew. I wanted to go and apologize to Martin Morton the next day and show my heart. Unbeknownst to him, the next day, Martin Morton went on a business trip. In order not to disturb him, I didn't message him, and wanted to wait until he came back to talk to him. But it's been a week since we met again. TNE Group has made a name for itself in the apparel industry through elderly clothing. The elderly clothing I designed received a particularly good response through TNE's publicity and achieved very good results. It was only later that I learned that Martin Morton was on a business trip to find a partner for the clothes I designed. I met him again at the celebration banquet, and I hadn't seen him for a week, and I felt like I was separated from him. He was dressed in a well-dressed suit, and listened to the conversation of the person next to him with a wine glass. I looked at him and saw that he seemed to be handsome again, and many of the women present glued their eyes to him. It's amazing. When I didn't see it, I thought about it, and when I saw it, I began to feel awkward again. I don't know what's going on. After the whole reception, I didn't say a word to him, but my eyes bumped into each other several times. At the end of the party, I stood at the door to blow the wind and sober up. Suddenly there was a man standing next to me, and I turned around. It was Martin Morton. I laughed and called him, "Martin Morton, congratulations." His voice was low. There was another brief silence. I don't know if I was drunk, so I suddenly asked, "Why didn't you just come to talk to me?" Martin Morton gave me a hand in the garment, and he didn't dare to look at me. "I'm afraid you're still angry." Alcohol was messing with my mind, and I asked without thinking about it, "Why did your dog steal my takeaway?" He was stunned for a moment, but still replied very seriously, "I'm sorry. I taught it." With that, Martin Morton looked at me quietly, with obvious nervousness in his eyes, as if waiting for my verdict. I suddenly laughed for no reason, tightened the clothes he was draping over me, and whispered to him, "Martin Morton, do you want to try it together?" Martin Morton looked at me in disbelief, his eyes slowly reddening, and cautiously confirmed to me, "I'm 8 years older than you. Do you really want to?" I looked him in the eye and asked him with a smile, "Have you ever heard a word? What? Old men are the ones who hurt the most." Martin Morton asked in a hoarse voice. "Who said that?" I replied, "My mom said that." Martin Morton carefully hugged me into his arms. "Auntie, that's right. I married Martin Morton 3 months after the relationship was confirmed." No way. This man hurts so much. I don't want to miss him. On the day of the wedding, I was so tired that I didn't know when I fell asleep, and when I woke up, it was already midnight. Martin Morton took me in his arms, and slept quietly next to me. There is no coldness and hardness on his face, and when he takes off his guard, he is so well behaved, like a clingy big dog. He hugged me and muttered dream words in his mouth. I listened closer, and couldn't hold back my laughter. Martin Morton was saying, "Great, it's finally legal. Extra, Martin Morton. My name is Martin Morton, and I am the president of TNE Group." Everyone said that I was indifferent, unkind, and a cold-faced Buddha with tough means. Everyone around me seems to be afraid of me, including my relatives. I can't help it. I can't seem to control my facial expressions, and I always subconsciously keep a cold face. It's not that I haven't practiced smiling in front of the mirror, but I find that when I laugh, it's more terrifying, and I don't know how to explain it. My reputation has just deteriorated little by little. Isn't it wronged? A little aggrieved, bullied me for not being able to speak, and gave me a hat. They say that people like me may never love someone, because nothing is more important to me than work. But I have a secret. I like Alexia Everina for a long time. Right Stowe knows that. He used to laugh at me, with the picture frame on my desk, saying that I was a coward and liked little girls for several years, and they didn't even know me. I snatched my picture frame and carefully wiped it. The frame was large, but there was only a 1-inch ID photo in it, which I placed on my desk in a regular manner. Right Stowe looked at my cautious appearance and scoffed. A picked-up ID photo for so many years. Martin Morton, you're a fucking pervert. As he said this, He casually threw a document on my desk. I opened it, and it contained the information of the girl I had in mind. I looked at him in astonishment, and he said, "Don't thank you, brother. I just can't get used to your cowardice. Your little girl's old garment factory is bankrupt. You have to see the opportunity to make a move. And if you like it, you have to chase it, or she will marry someone else." I nodded, carefully putting the information away. Right, Stowe sighed. What can such a little girl understand? It's better to be better than those big beauties, with long hair and red lips. I glanced at him and began to understand the prospects of the elderly garment factory. Right, Stowe looked at me and shook his head. "You're hopeless." I didn't contradict him. I just said, "You don't understand. I'm long gone." Heh. Right, Stowe lit a cigarette with a disdainful expression. "I don't understand. And I don't like girls who are 8 years younger than me. I think I'm a beast myself. I also thought I was a brute. And the first time I met Alexia Evelina, my company was already in its infancy, and she was only in her 3rd year of high school. The first time I saw her, I was moved. That day, I heard that she went bravely, and almost missed the college entrance examination. She stood on the side of the road and stopped a car. I stopped, rolled down the window, and the little girl was very anxious to lie down at my window. The tip of her nose was covered with sweat, and her hair was also wet with sweat, and it was thin and soft on her face. But she didn't care about it, so she looked at me with blank eyes. That's good. My eyes shone slightly, and I looked away uncomfortably, and my heart was like a feather crossing, and I was numb. I forced down this feeling and said coldly, something, unexpectedly. The little girl was not afraid of me, and boldly stretched out her hand, and pulled the corner of my clothes through the car window. "Brother, I'm a college entrance examination student. Can you send me to school?" Because she was in a hurry, the little girl's voice trembled slightly. My eyes looked uncontrollably at the hands tugging at the corners of my clothes, white and tender. It didn't make sense. My ears were uncontrollably red. When the little girl saw that I didn't speak, she thought I didn't agree, and pulled my hand harder on my clothes. He began to cry when he spoke. "Brother, please take me for a moment. I'm running late." The corners of her mouth curled downward, like a deflated kitten, very pitiful. For a moment my heart was filled with guilt. Could I refuse? I can't refuse. She's so well behaved. I looked at the time and opened the door with one hand. "Come up." The little girl's eyes brightened instantly. "Thank you, brother." The little girl kept praising me all the way, and this kind of thing rarely happens to me, because I have always been a serious person. When others speak, they have a sense of distance from me. However, the corners of my mouth couldn't help but rise, and this feeling seemed to be good. Maybe it's because the little girl's voice is so good. Anyway, I remembered the few words she praised me for being good and good-looking, and I remembered it for a long time. By the time she got to the gate of her school, the exam had already started for 2 minutes, and she was busy going down. She handed me a fountain pen, and said that it was a pen given to her by her grandfather, that she had used it for many years, and that I must accept it as a token of gratitude. I looked at the new-looking fountain pen in my hand in a daze, and the moment she closed the car door, I said to her, "Come on for the college entrance examination." She closed the door and smiled brightly at me. Okay. At that time, I thought that, when she went to college, she would be able to legally fall in love. I thought I was 5 years behind her, but I didn't expect that the little girl was very good, jumping 2 levels in junior high school, and 1 level in high school, went to college, and she was still a child in the eyes of those around her. She and I are 8 years apart, which is the difference I can call my uncle, because she is about the same age as my little niece in the family. As for this, I thought it would just be an ordinary episode in my life. But one day, my assistant called me and said that, when I was washing the car, the co-pilot found an ID photo, and asked me what to do with it. My tone was cold, Just throw away the things that are not important, and don't call me for small things. At that time, I thought that this assistant should be replaced, and such a small thing would take up my time. The assistant heard the coldness in my tone and hurriedly explained, "Okay, Martin Morton, I won't make such a mistake next time." I only replied with a HMM. After hanging up the phone, I realized later, how could my co-pilot have a passport photo? Speculation flashed through her head. Was it hers? It was the first time I sat all afternoon and didn't want to work. When the assistant returned, he handed me the car keys. I pretended to ask him casually, "Has that ID photo been processed?" The assistant was stunned for a moment, and replied respectfully, "I have already thrown it away according to your orders." My hand holding the pen was clenched, and it had already been thrown away. I asked him again, my voice unusually low, "Is the person in the ID photo a girl?" The assistant nodded. "It's a pretty girl." My eyes darkened, and as I flipped through the papers, I said as usual, "It's okay, let's go down." The assistant nodded, took a few steps and came back. "Martin Morton, I think I still have to talk to you." When I threw it, it was seen by Wright Stowe, and he picked it up. "So that picture is now in Wright Stowe's hand, and he said he was going to ask you, and he had this hobby behind his back." Sorry, Martin Morton, I didn't do it. I didn't even listen to what the assistant said at the end. My attention was all there. The picture wasn't lost. It was at Wright Stowe. At that moment, I really felt the feeling of being lost and regained, and it turned out that this thing was quite important to me. I waited in the office until the evening before Wright Stowe came to the office with a cigarette in his mouth. He pushed the small, 1-inch picture in front of me, raised an eyebrow and asked, "Ask us, Martin Morton, what's going on?" It turns out that Martin Morton, who is rumored to be not close to women, has long been golden. "Are you so hiding it from me?" I took the photo and looked at it carefully, and there was no damage. The girl in the photo has bright eyes, as if she is full of expectations for the future. It was a look that I had never touched, and I had only seen it once, but the image of that day was repeated in my mind. The touch of the little girl's hand pulling my clothes seemed to still hook my heart. After so many days, my heart still beats violently just when I see her photo. It's exciting. They were right. People like me shouldn't like people. But once I did, I couldn't give up. Wright Stowe shook off the ashes of his cigarette and casually asked me, "Does this girl look so small? Is she an adult?" I was silent for a few seconds before replying, "I don't know." Wright Stowe shook his cigarette ash. "Martin Morton, you're blockbuster. Is this legal?" I didn't know how long I would have been thinking about a little girl I'd only met once. However, she was the one who approached me first, and she called me brother. The little girl is obediently going to college, and I heard that she is very good, and she gets a scholarship every year. I didn't have a chance to get to know her, and I didn't dare to bother her. Her school celebrates and invites successful people from the community to visit the school. I also want to take this opportunity to give my school's students more opportunities when looking for jobs in the future. I would never have participated in this kind of event, but I heard that it was her school, and I started choosing clothes to wear on the day of the election a month ago. Wright Stowe laughed at me for being useless, but I think he doesn't understand the taste of love. He only spends his days drinking, and I'm not the same person. I didn't want to deal with him. On the day of the celebration, I had the pleasure of meeting her again, and she was even more beautiful than before, and she seemed to have grown a little taller. She wears a high ponytail, and every time she shakes it, she shows the vitality of youth. I saw her from afar, walking with her classmates, not knowing what they were talking about, with a smile in her eyes. I was not as calm as I seemed to be, and every time I approached her, I had to get a little nervous. When I was about to rub shoulders with her, the poster of the celebration in her hand was suddenly blown to the ground by the wind. I bent down to pick it up for her, and at that moment, I felt like God was helping me. When she took the poster from my hand, she politely said thank you, but she looked at me with polite detachment in her eyes. She really doesn't remember me. I suppressed the loss in my heart, didn't dare to expose half a point, and politely replied to her, "You're welcome." I hadn't gone far before I heard their conversation with me. That man was so handsome just now. Was the distinguished guest invited by the school? Isn't it a bit old? But old men are more popular. You're so handsome. And the girl I cared about the most just smiled indifferently. It's okay. Not half as handsome as my Tim. My Tim's muscles are stimulated just to think about. Edwin is good, but I'm still the most handsome. Tim, Edwin. It turns out that she has so many suitors, and this one named Tim seems to be my biggest competitor. I looked up her entire school by Tim's name, and I didn't know which male classmate it was. I pulled this name into the blacklist of T&E group. And how handsome Tim really is the question of the future that has been bothering me for several years. And I rubbed shoulders with the little girl countless times, but I couldn't muster up the courage to ask for a wish it. She never gave me the afterglow because I was just a stranger. How I want to get to know her reasonably is a rare problem I have encountered. When I was 28 years old, everyone was pushing me to get married, and I didn't rush to set a small goal for myself. This year, I'm going to start as friends with that little girl named Alexia Evelina. As for Tim, I'm going to try to be more handsome than him. Muscular. I have it too. And I'll show it to the little girl, when the time comes. I can be more exciting than Tim. The end.